Hey everybody, so I figured I'd create a quick video to show off some content that's currently in development for ICBM. So for those who have know, really have not been doing a lot of work over the last, I would say about a year or so. Been busy with life, work, etc. Decided finally, after letting my mental health recover and everything else, I can finally get back to coding, partly in thanks to actually developing, or rather adopting some new tools. Um, One of them is CodeDeck. This has actually been keeping me highly focused. For those who haven't seen it and haven't been in our Discord, you can join and actually see me actively create these tasks and actually implement them, add them, and so on. It'll pop up in one of our dev automation channels. But tons of tasks have been added here to kind of keep me focused and keep me from slipping up and just kind of falling off the wagon when we do development. Part of the focus on those is obviously the cluster missiles has been a really big focus for like last year. Of like when I do find time, which has usually been an hour or two a month. I've been popping and working on this. Was doing that without any kind of plan. Finally got a plan going with the codex. So most of this has been implemented. You can kind of see as soon as I open up, some of the cards kind of fall off the auto archive about every couple days. But most of it has been implemented. There's still a few things still left to do before cluster missiles are 100% there, but they are now at the point where they can be released and will function for the most part. Things that might glitch out are going to be the math might not angle just right. So if a missile comes in at say like a 45 rather than a straight down 90, you might see the entities kind of pop up at some weird positions, but they'll still, for the most part, spread out. Impact rotation, a few other just strange behaviors that I'll kind of go over as I show off the current version, everything else. But cluster missiles has been the big focus. To get to that point, I also started working on what was called a projectile system that I built, and I'm kind of already retiring as soon as I built it. The idea behind the projectile system was to give me a way that I can implement just about anything as a projectile. Now, what a projectile kind of means is more of a development concept rather than a literal concept. It's basically anything that can be kind of thrown, anything that can be projected, anything kind of be like shot out rocket-wise every so often. Technically, that applies to everything because you can throw a rock, you can throw a piece of cobblestone, and so on. So it kind of is the ideal that it lets the system spawn an entity, preferably from an item, but it doesn't really have to be, and can kind of set its rotation, position, and velocity, and kind of give it an understanding of like, here's the things that work with anything else. And the purpose of doing that is so the cluster missile isn't bound to hard-coded values. For those of you familiar with the really old versions of ICBM, the reason why we only had 2 cluster missiles, the conventional and nuclear, is they were hard-coded to spawn the other missiles of that exact type and kind of distribute them really sloppily out in a direction, and kind of sort of worked. If you airbursted just right, you could get an okay-ish spread, and it would function really well. I was like, I don't want to just port that as is, so I ended up removing it for a while because it really just wasn't practically working. It was just kind of cool. It was like kind of that slight shock and awe, but in practical terms of like how you use it in the game was not really good. So I was like, hey, we're going to remove it, we'll re-implement it, we'll make it significantly high quality better, and not only will we make it better, we'll make it dynamic, because I tend to do that with as much content as I can, so that you as a user can decide how you want it to function. Now in the current version, so far that just means you can decide what items go in it. Future versions, I really do want to spend some time making sure that you can customize how the items distribute, how many items will spawn per layers, how many layers will spawn, the velocity kick out, the deploy timing, which will come into the other system we're working on, which is the action system. Now, this is something I've been thinking about for a couple years now. When I started reworking ICBM on 112, which has been taking quite a while because the code was in a really terrible state, we used to have the explosive system. The explosive system was how Cal Clavi and me originally built the system to understand what could be created as a blast object. Now, I don't think he ever really called it that originally when he wrote the original code, but the idea was you had an explosive. It was meant to be something similar to TNT. After all, we did have block versions. That's the reason why they're in the game, is it was meant to mimic TNT. And then you would define different kind of TNT-style blocks that you would then kind of trigger from a missile entity, a grenade, a bomb cart, whatever you wanted to use. And these were very hard-coded, very enum-driven metadata to be specific orientated of invoking some kind of function and doing just a sheer everything in the area kind of gets wrecked or decimated, focusing very heavily on video game style logic rather than actual functional code and everything else. And it worked. It got a really cool mod, very impressive. A lot of people loved it, and I even appreciated it, which is why I worked on the project for so long. But I was like, hey, I needed to rewrite this. And so I rewrote and I built a blast system. Blast system let it be much more abstract, let other mods come in and replace, update, change, add their own versions of whatever they wanted to do. We've even had a few different mods in 112 actually update and change certain blasts. Like there's a mod that actually overrides our nuclear blast in order to add radiation blocks back, which I've been really, really slow on getting us radiation back in there. And it's because it's going to come through atomic science. The idea would be that you wouldn't have a nuclear bomb unless you had atomic science system. But we'll get to that point later. So that was the built the blast system that let you get all that customization, all that different options, let it be much more abstract so I can implement much more functionality later down the road, and could eventually get to the idea which what I wanted to do, but have kind of somewhat changed my opinion on, which was add-ons. I was going to do add-ons, and the idea behind the add-ons is you have a whole bunch of content that didn't quite fit in the base version, or was too much on its own, that would be split off so that a mod pack or a user could decide, hey, do I want to have, more chemical weapons? Do I have more biological weapons? Do I want to have, more joke style weapons? Do I want to have, things that are designed more for logistics rather than warfare, and so on? And I was like, this would be really cool as add-ons. And we're still probably going to do add-ons because it's just going to make development more practical. As when we update between major versions, I don't have to update all of the content in one go. I can update the add-ons as if they're modulars and go, hey, we'll update the core version, then we'll come back and update one module at a time and slowly get them upgraded. So that still may happen, but we'll probably see more content start to get introduced into the base version, as it's just going to be more convenient for you guys as the users. Plus, just certain content isn't going to work well separated. Like I was thinking about doing clusters as their own add-on, but I was like, well, I'm going to eventually add crafting tables for this stuff so that they're more customizable, easier to craft, easier to automate the crafting process. And I'm like, oh, well, those really should go in the base version. So that's where a lot of stuff's going to probably change. But anyways, getting back to the idea, so build the blast system. And I was like, you know what, this kind of works, but blast really could be rethought of as generic actions. Because really all it is some kind of function we call, and we tell it, at this position in the world, just do something. The thing that calls it, which is the missile, the bomb card, the grenade, whatever, doesn't actually know what explosive it is. It knows kind of the ID, so it knows it's supposed to be condensed, but it doesn't know what condensed means until the function is called, then that does something to the world. So I'm like, well, what are we really doing? We're triggering an action. So player throws a grenade, which is an action. That action then causes an entity to spawn in the world. That entity then skips across the floor, and then after a certain amount of time, it triggers another action of exploding. And that lets it explode, but the explosion process also triggers more actions. So there's actions of editing the world, actions of damaging enemies, and so on. So I built this concept of the action and conditional system, and it kind of started as I really badly needed a conditional system, because I needed a way for the projectile system, specifically parachutes, which I'll show off in a bit, to be able to conditionally decide when they dropped their cargo, and when their cargo landed, how that cargo behaved after it dropped. So I was like, I got the conditional system rolling, I was like, hey, I want to integrate this with the blast. I'm like, but the blasts are getting really bad off and are being hard-coded, so let's build an action system. And we'll make the action system, which was originally going to be called the triggers. So there's going to be conditions, or actually they were going to both be the same thing. You'd have conditionals, which would have been called triggers, and the triggers would have triggered some kind of behavior, which eventually became actions. So I'm calling them action and conditional system. And then actions is basically anything and everything I want it to be. So far we don't have a huge amount of implemented. EMP has been completely recoded as actions. It still needs more work as I want to get individual actions for specific machine interactions. So depending on what machine it actually touches, it'll trigger an action of drain energy, an action of destroy the machine, an action of specifically setting thermal expansion or specific setting mechanism, energy values, and so on. So let mod integration work a lot better. It all fires through a listener system, which means it can be hooked by other mods, and that can be anything from just blocking that interaction to triggering things like Dynamap, to doing admin stuff, doing block protections, whatever. It gives us full access. The action system, which is kind of really cool, actually comes with a cause by system. It knows exactly what caused the action. It not only doesn't know what caused the action, it knows the chain that led up to it. So if a player clicks a remote, it will record that, hey, a player did something, that remote did something, it sent it across the radio system, something received that message, so it'll record that. It'll then record that message ended up being some kind of different action. That action will also then get recorded. And so record the chain all the way up to the actual end event, which would be firing a missile. Or in that case, the missile would just be one action in that chain, because as soon as it impact, it would be another one. This gives us a full customization over what's going on, because now a protection system downstream can go, oh, at the very beginning of this, there was a player. That player is not allowed editing blocks within this area, so we block the action. So even though the missile impacted and everything was supposed to do, there was no block edits anymore, which should make quite a few mods happy. Sadly, we're at 112, so I doubt there's very many people editing anymore. But once we get to 120, this means any existing block protection mod out there can be given an add-on to link the two mods together. or additional protection mods could be created or whatever could do this. Also means we can easily again track and show on a map, for example, that hey, there's this player all the way over here, and it could draw a line from there to the target position and say that's what happened, and kind of show this nice interactive thing. Like say you had a PvP arena going on, you can actually as a player watch the interactive map while you're watching somebody's live stream and actually see what's happening with it. You can even do live stream interactions too with it, which is kind of really cool. So there's a lot of possibility with this, which is why I kind of want to implement it. It's also going to lend in later to other mods we end up updating. We still have Atomic Science needs updated, which could use action system itself. We have a Similine needs updated, which also could use actions, but maybe not as much. But it's going to come into play more with some of like the weapon mods if we ever port those, or the NPC mods if we ever work on those again. This action is very well play very well in NPC mods because AIs could trigger actions, and it would work so well with their logic, because then I wouldn't have to specifically tell an AI how to do everything. I just have to provide actions of how it interacts with word, like insert item in a furnace would be an action. Take item out of furnace would be an action. You just tell it how to do that, and you can make it more abstract rather than it being furnace oriented. You can go take item out of slot 1, and it just happened to know that slot 1 happens to be a fuel slot because it's looking at a furnace, which will then set it through other actions. So that's a cool behavior. So now that I've gone over this and how this is all organized and stuff like that, if you all want to look through this, this isn't the link you guys would actually use. Let me go find that link for you all, because you all can see this visually. Actually, go back in here. That's how I get the link. Is I can click this. So this will be listed under opencodex.io/vaults. And this is part of it. We've been grouping all of our large mods under vaults. For all those who haven't been paying attention, pretty much all the large mods have been treated as part of the vaults project. They have been for an incredibly long period of time. It's why our team got a little upset when it turned out we lost the name to vaults for like a while and had to get it back slowly. We do have it back, although at this point it doesn't really matter. So many mod packs and other people have come along and used it that it's kind of half dead, but I still like holding on to it because it's kind of fun to remember that a lot of these mods are kind of grouped together into one thought process or group. But you guys can get a hold of this URL. It also is available on our Discord to get to, and you can see everything that's going on. And I believe it does give you all the ability to vote on cards, as well as see kind of commentary. I don't think I have comments on the cards specifically turned on. We might do that later if the more members on the team become more active to help me manage it, which will let all of you not only vote up on cards, but also, offer suggestions, feedback, or kind of like discuss between each other what's kind of going on. Although Discord's probably a better place for that, so I'll probably open up threads where you guys can start threads and start conversations about what's happening with cards or what you think is going to be developed. But getting into the showcase of the content, after 12 minutes of me rambling on, so in terms of the feature sets that's going to be implemented, and this is part of version 6, which still might be a little bit away from being released. I might do an early testing release of it, but I still have a little bit to go on making sure all the content's polished and adding a few more things I want to do before I call it good. Because once we release version 6, I'm going to go back and do some polishing work, and then it's going to be the start of the migration towards 120. We'll be going one major version at a time. This is just to make this easy on my limited sanity, as trying to go straight to 120 from 112 is probably going to be a meltdown episode and a half for me. As there's a lot of code changes that happen between there, and there's very little support I'll probably get in the process. But going one major version at a time, I can pester a few of the other developers I know that go, hey, how do I do this and this? And they'll probably help me walk through. I have other tools also to work with as well. So for all those who don't like AI assistant tools, they are actually really good for asking questions of how to port things. I actually was surprised myself. I've been toying with them, and they actually have more Minecraft knowledge than I've seen with most players, which is insanely creepy and weird. But part of the content, we have cluster missiles are now coming out. These have been kind of in the code base for a while. They just haven't been craftable. They are craftable now. Whether getting the crafting recipe to show up is a whole different story. But they are craftable. I still have to fix JEI integration because the recipes are somewhat custom. When you do craft the missiles, you can then combine any item you actually want to. So let me go ahead and get us a crafting table, and I can show that behavior. And we'll grab some tulips to grab this and just show it off, because it actually does not matter what you stick in it. It can be literally any item stack. Now, depending on what you stick in it, the behavior will change, and this is where some of the other stuff that's going to be implemented will come into play. And you can kind of see some other stuff in my inventory. So when you craft it with this, it should work. As soon as I talk about you can stick anything in it, it just decides, nope. You gotta love it when stuff decides it wants to not work or work. Yeah, so there's other recipe interfering with this, I think. Can I put the crafting table itself in there? No. But the idea would be is that you could stick a cluster missile in here, and you'd be able to craft items into it and be able to actually create stack of it. So you'd be able to create, for example, this, which would have a payload of parachutes, or some of the other examples that we currently have implemented, like arrows, for example, which let you create a much more powerful version of the shrapnel, bomblets, which is one of the ones I am going to show off here in a bit. And of course, other ones like this one, which is supposed to be cookies, is what it's supposed to say on it. But I have to work on the tooltip some more, as it currently can see that that is a parachute payload, but it cannot see what's in that parachute. So this is something I have to add custom tooltipping for. But the idea is you would craft it like that. And then you would be able to get a cluster missile, and you can then insert it into its launcher as standard. If you do use a cluster missile, you are going to need to airburst it. I think I've shown some videos in the past of that behavior, where you will need to make sure it's above target. Now, by default, cluster missiles are kind of working under their own new missile type. I've created something called an any missile actionable. So it actually uses action data and everything else, unlike the old version which used explosive data, which means it is more customizable. It comes with preconditions, and the two preconditions it actually comes with is one, these won't trigger on impact anymore. So if you fail to like detonate above target, it's going to smack on the ground and do nothing. This is to mimic how cluster munitions work in real life. Most cluster munitions actually airburst, and they do that for a reason, because when they impact on the ground, the doors can't open up on the side, meaning the sub-munitions cannot get out. So if they impact on the ground, you're just stuck. And the idea would be you can go recover the missile, or your enemy can recover it, so they'll be able to right-click it down the road when I eventually add that logic, and be able to pick up and recover your sub-munitions. So just kind of make sure you pay attention to what you're setting your settings for. The hope is, with things like the laser detonator and the screen, is to add an offset modifier. So when you do laser detonate, it should automatically offset it by 20 above. Or hopefully I can give you a GUI to customize that behavior, but it will come down the road. But yeah, so we do have those. Some of the other items that have been added is we now have parachutes, and these work the same. I know you can craft anything you want with them, add anything into it. As you can see, by default, I've got a demo for egg. This is just kind of a joke, because if you've ever been in a science class, one of the things they actually often do is have you throw an egg off the top of the building and see if it can survive. Parachutes is a common strategy. Furnace, this is the demo that you can place machines, and TNT blocks, because I'm eventually going to let you airdrop explosives and have them trigger after they've landed. Not before, but after. The idea behind this is, partially I deal with that conditional system, is that I'm going to eventually give the players control over how these blocks behave when they land. So this is going to be specifically useful because you may decide you want that TNT block to sit there and not go off until something gets close to it. This lets you effectively create proximity mines. I'm even going to add other modifiers to it down the road, where you might be able to make a bouncing Betty by as soon as it proximity detects, it shoots in the air and then goes off. This will be very useful with shrapnel explosives. And what's cool about this is that this won't be me adding custom code to the blocks themselves. This will be me adding things that modify and work with the blocks to then let them do behavior, which means if you go and install another mod, say like Explosive Plus, although I don't think it's updated in newer versions, but if you install it or say Mechanism or something else, you can have those blocks from their mods do advanced behavior in a way that's unexpected. So you could have, like, say, a sentry gun from, I think, Open Sentries was the name mod, have it kick in the air and then start shooting people. I doubt we'll ever get it to be able to shoot from a parachute or something like that, but it'd be kind of cool to kick it up and then place itself so then it can, see everything around it. There's some cool ideas to be able to do. I'll let you all have fun and figure out which mods work and which ones don't, and just give suggestions to us of what things you want us to try and modify. So you got all these ones, and these can be thrown too. So if you craft them and you just want to like throw stuff to your buddies, if I can get this to work without hitting me in the face. Again, there's more work to be done. So you can throw them and they will parachute and they will land. So this gives you a really cool way that if you're on the top of the mountain, you want to airdrop stuff to your buddies, and just kind of a creative way, because you can already throw items. This is just kind of a neat aesthetic type of ideal that's just kind of fun, is why parachutes exist. We also have a different version of the parachute, which is more I made for comic relief of myself, which is balloons, and I still have to work on tooltips and everything for these. These show up as a 2D item in your inventory, but as soon as you throw them, they are 3D. And I eventually want to get like a rope render, but these work kind of the inverse ideal of a parachute. Rather than slowly falling down, these will go up and then release the cargo. Yeah, the ideal behind these is how these will be more useful is if we end up getting some kind of mod integration for like wind or something, is you can have explosives attached to these and have the wind push them to help disperse them more and then release their payloads. Or you can just have fun with, sending items all over the place and kind of messing with your buddies. But part of this also, if I go back to the parachutes, because I kind of talked about how you can do this with things like furnaces, is I can do this. This has a bit of a bigger parachute. Now, if I really want to get a 3D parachute on this eventually, but right now it just has a 2D one. We've kind of upscaled it. We made it billboard so it looks at least somewhat okay looking at the player, but it does let you drop machines. Now, they're going to kind of face whatever rotation north, I think is. It's either north or south. I don't know which of the two. I can kind of check. It's north. So they're going to face default because we don't have much integration for the rotation just yet. But my hope is it'll try to face in the direction it lands. But it does let you land machines and they're functional. And it will remember what's in the machines. And the cool behavior with this as well is the same code that drives this is the same code that now drives any kind of flying blocks in the mod. So the red matters, the sonics, everything will remember what machines in there because they're all the same block code. So I went through, I spent a whole bunch of time rewriting it. I made them place now with a fake player, so they will place fake player. The ideal is when we do get the cause by system working better, it will try to place it by the player who threw it. So if you try to throw this in a protected zone on a protection system, it will remember which player threw it, and it will go, hey, I'm not allowed placing this, and it will just drop the item on the floor. So that would kind of be the ideal behind it. But if you are allowed to place it, it will remember that you did place it. It will place it as your player, which will integrate with other mods that may have like special permissions behind who placed them. I may have to toy with certain mods though, because thermal expansion machines I think get an owner, but you may not want to assign an owner if you trigger something like a red matter throwing a block across the room, because you obviously didn't place it yourself, you just kind of threw it. So there might be some behavior behind how I integrate that, and I'll try to open that up to config systems so that way mod pack developers can come in and change things. Which, speaking of mod pack developers, some of these stuff is now highly customizable. Clusters, for example, you can ban what items go into the cluster. You can invert that ban list to make it allow only, and you can change the volume of items. So by default, most items start with a volume of 1. Certain items have a pre-default volume set for them. Parachutes and balloons are set to 2. Missiles are set to 10. Actually, no, they're set to 20. So it keeps you from putting too much stuff in the clusters. You can customize this very heavily, and I'm planning on adding pretty elaborate strings to the system. So rather than just putting a registry key string in it, like say like Minecraft Stone, you'll eventually be able to do more things like specify exact metadata matching, fuzzy logic matching, so you can match on specific fields in that metadata or MBT, or be able to disable it on only specific days of the week or specific hours and so on. So there's a lot of logic in there. The current support, which you'll find on the wiki, so we do have a wiki attached to the GitHub repository, so you'll find it under source controller on the CurseForge page, although I think there's a wiki button that takes you there too. We have support for putting in the current item. I think I did metadata support. We have the ability to adjust a sorting priority and the ability to ban entire mods. And those same things also work for setting sizes. So if you want to set a size, you can set a default size for every piece of content underneath a mod or on specific items. This is a similar style of config system that already existed for the flying block registry. Flying block registry let you also ban blocks pretty easily, with one of the defaults being dynamic trees, because it causes weird behavior, although you can see in the world we have a ton of them. They are very strange when they want to go break, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm not super familiar with this mod myself, I just have it installed for bug checking. Yeah, they fall over. So when this I have happening, a lot of the explosives do not interact very well with this, because this is not normal behavior. So we have been working on trying to fix that, but we do have them disabled as flying blocks for now because it does crash. But you can go in and disable more mods if they do crash things, although there's crash protection built into the thing, and we're going to try to put as much crash protection as possible so your game, doesn't die just because another mod has some weird behavior. But now that I've gone through and kind of showed the items, one of the things you might also be noticing is I have 2 rocket launchers here. I have a ballistic and direct. So direct is the original RPG. This fires, if I go to it and I grab, I'll just leave a cluster missile in here. So fire it, aim at something, it'll go in a straight line, it'll explode, it'll throw items everywhere. Works as you would kind of expect, works with any type of missile. Some changes that have happened to the RPG is it now will ray trace up to 500 meters and detect what you're looking at. This is done server side, not client side, so it can be off ever so slightly if you're moving a little bit on the quick side and it hasn't synchronized with the server yet. But it will at least detect what's going on. And this is useful because it now lets us air burst munitions. So as you saw, that cluster did go off. It did not actually hit that tree, because if it hit that tree, it would not have gone off, because it has a tendency to get stuck in dyna trees. Again, there's a lot of bug interactions between these mods. So it air burst about 5 meters in front of it. Now, for clusters, this isn't particularly useful, but it is going to be useful for other types of explosions like the shrapnel, incendiaries, other things that might benefit more from being burst in the air and actually doing a lot more radial damage around them. I am hoping to make that customizable in the future. We just don't have the time and energy to really build a more complicated GUI to let you guys customize how you want these missiles to behave. I eventually also want to implement a programmer for these missiles, so you can actually highly customize how you want each individual missile to behave, because you might want your first missile you fire to like crazy Ivan towards the target, the next one to kind of like home towards somebody. So there's going to be that ideal between programming the missiles and also having the launcher pre-program a missile when it fires. So once we get the programming system in place, hopefully there will be a GUI on here that you can just load programs. And I probably will try to save the programs globally to the player data in the server side as well. So if you log in for a new machine or whatever you're doing with any tool, they won't be saved on the tools individually. They'll be saved to kind of almost like an account type system. Just won't be a server we own. It'll be like whatever server you log into. So that will give you the ability to like really quickly program things. That's kind of the hope down the road. As well, we'll probably do basic settings. So you don't have to know the programming system. It'll be like basic ones like, how far do you want it to ray trace? How do you want to do minimum checks for safety? Do you want to air burst, 5 meters away, 10 meters away? Do you want to air burst on inertia fuse? So on. There'll be tons of cool things. Now, the other RPG is the ballistic. So I wanted to call this a javelin. But I'm pretty sure that name to some extent is like either copyrighted or trademarked. So I was like, yeah, probably not a good idea to use a company's name because I know that can get you in trouble every so often. I doubt they ever go after somebody like me, but like it's easy to call it a ballistic launcher. So this basically works very similar to Javelin. It will kick the missile out the front. It will then go up and then come straight down on the target. It's using the same exact flight code as the silos, and that's intentional to make this as simple as possible to do. Now, I've kind of wanted to implement this in the mod for quite a while. The reason we didn't have in older versions is because the flight logic on missiles was so badly hard-coded that it was really difficult to reuse anywhere. Recently, and I say recently, it's been I think last year or something like that, I recoded it all to be very dynamic. You can now on like missiles add any flight logic you want. Now this is from a developer side, you can add whatever you want. From a user side, we haven't got to the point to let you guys customize flight logic just yet. That's probably again going to come with a programming system where you can then define how you want missiles to individually behave. Do you want them to home? Do you want them to go up straight up? Do you want them to make curves? Do you want them to avoid impacts? I was even joking yesterday about adding AI control. We're probably never going to add AI to the mod. It's just too costly, but like we can jokingly make features that behave like AI. It would be kind of cool to do. But yeah, so this kicks 3 meters out, and then it's going to do a 20 meter offset. So wherever you're aiming at, it's going to aim 20 meters above that to air burst. And I'll kind of show how this works. So I need to aim somewhere 50 meters away because it has currently a safety of 50 meters, and this is just to kind of keep the missile math from breaking. You see it went up, and it goes up way too high, so I might have to add some code logic to make it not go nearly as high, and this is purely just for aesthetic reasons. But it's coming straight back down, and it airburst. At least it should have. Nope, it did not airburst. So this is where the part where it might take a little bit while before I release is there is some weird behavior. This is where I was talking about. The missiles, if they impact the ground, will not go off. I am actually quite surprised to see this one standing up. Half the time they glitch out and are halfway inside the wall. But it's kind of cool to see that it is actually impacting because that's what I do want it to do. Although I kind of want to go a little bit more on the ground, but that might be an aesthetic visual render I change because I do absolutely have to have that collider stay above the ground so you can pick it up eventually. And keep in mind, for all those who've ever tried to shoot these missiles down with anything like bows, this is why they're so hard to hit because they have a small collider. That's a problem with Minecraft, not a problem with our code because it is really difficult to do non-access line bounding boxes. So for those who understand what that is, a access line bounding box is pretty much like, it can be like that, or it can be kind of like that. It can be in kind of that style of shape. It cannot be angled. Minecraft does not know how to do a bounding box that is angled or rotated weirdly. I'm hoping they fix that at some point in the future. And I think someone hinted at they might have a more complicated solution in newer versions, but I'm on 1.12, so I haven't got a chance to play with a lot of stuff. So I'm like, beta versions behind is fun. But the idea is that should work. So let me go ahead and try this one more time. Because I have had this work a few times. And it has been somewhat consistently working, and I would be really sad if it broke. Also, that flickering is because I'm working on improving render performance. I go to make a video and it breaks right when we make the video. We'll try it one more time. If this kind of fails again, I will like half laugh. What the? I mean, I want to add bouncing betties to the mod, but this is not how I thought it would go. Okay, one more time. Come on. I believe in the code. There it goes. Yep, so here this is deploying parachutes and cookies. There's about 50 of them being deployed. And it spreads out pretty cool. It gets you this kind of weird like arc flower shape. So like that's how the bomblets are going to work. So if I'm going to go and actually change this out because I do want to say I was going to show the bomblet version. I want to show the bomblet version and kind of give you an idea of some of the destructive power you will eventually be able to use. So the bomblets are pretty basic. These are going to be running condensed explosives, very similar to the grenades. So they're going to do devastation, and they're going to like hit a massive area. So that kind of scarred that entire area over there. I'm going to assume these are like Dyna tree roots. I swear this mod's got like so many issues with it. Integrations are wild. Because that runs TNT explosive code, so if it's breaking with TNT, it's breaking with, or breaking with our explosions, but breaking with TNT too, possibly. So one more time to kind of get that destructive ideal. Definitely need to work on that archive. It's way too high. There we go. Dyna tree does make that explosion look really good because you can see the trees fall over. But yeah, pretty devastating area-wise. So these are really basic explosives that are doing like a power of like 1 or 2 TNT-wise. So they're a little bit weaker than TNT, yet they're still able to devastate a large area. So if you got the spread, really good on this. This is where you want to airburst really high off the ground because they'll spread out further. This is also where I'm hoping to get customization going because you can increase that kick-out force or that randomization to kind of like devastate a larger area if you want to devastate somebody's base, say like they had farms going on or they had a whole bunch of solar panels. Ooh, those trees look really fun. I'm really hoping to get some shrapnel and cinder rays going here too, because shrapnel will actually cut through leaves. There we go. Take out a good chunk of the forest there. Yeah, so this is pretty devastating. This actually might now be more devastating than some of the other explosives. Now, the crafting cost, this is going to be pretty high. I don't think I have a crafting recipe for the bomblets just yet because they need more development work. But the idea of what these would be about, I want to say, a quarter of the cost of what a missile is going to cost. So like if you plan to use them, you're actually going to eat a large cost. But it's still going to be pretty much more effective than probably, say, the nuclear blast right now. Nuclear blast really is just a little on the weaker side. And let me go find the missile for that. I'm really hoping one of these days we get a chance to just kind of work through and update the nuclear, because it's been on that to-do list for such a long time. But without like atomic science being updated, it's really hard to get that radiation factor, because what makes the nuclear so scary, or at least how it's supposed to work, is it's not the explosion size that gets you, it's that radiation. Although in real life, it's meant to be the explosion. Radiation is actually a side effect. Yeah. It deforests a little bit further out because it's got that much, much larger deforestation and mutation call, and it will create zombies and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's got a bit more of a devastation. So I should go over here to compare it. No safe target. That's that ray trace that kicks in. So that's more than 500 meters away. I might end up increasing it out to like 1,000 just so we can actually get. There's no way that's more than 500. I guess it is. Huh. Weird. Yeah, so it's crater-wise, it does about the same. However, non-crater-wise, it's a lot different. But that's going to be probably enough for this part of it. So I'll see you all later, and hopefully I'll be able to keep a little bit more regularity to posting videos showing features, as the plan is to try to upscale a lot more on how much development we're doing, because I not only want to get this mod up to newer versions, but there's a huge amount of content I do have planned for overhauling the mod and getting it to a much more modern and much more powerful version. We'll see you all.